like to go ahead and call to order here the Planning Board regular meeting for May 21st, 2024. We have a quorum present. Can I get a roll call, please? Since we're here, we're a little light, just so we know who's present at this time.
John Gemignani.
Trey Taylor.
And Daniel Ferris. Thank you very much. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Perfect.
I second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Moving on for tonight, we have item C for meeting minutes from the April 16th Planning Board on any notes or corrections for that meeting.
I'd like to make a move to approve the minutes from last month.
Second.
I'd like to take a moment, if you don't mind, and I'll interrupt here just for a quick second. A question was brought up from the BOC perspective on one of the items that we were talking about, and inquired what we were concerned about on the Emerson Park property. And I looked back over my meeting minutes, and I wanted to bring back something. I just watched the video from the BOC. I was not able to attend. I was traveling. Madison left off a piece that I felt was very critical and in the public interest from that meeting on the Emerson Park issue, that there was a question regarding the park fee in lieu, or the park dedication requirements, and how it is applicable to the multifamily purpose, and then layering in with the conditional rezoning, the additives of what we were able to have within our purview. With that said, in short, I believe that project, we were owed as a municipality an additional roughly 9 acres that was not accounted for with the 420 dwelling units in the multifamilies call out for the proposed prospective project. I believe the 420 units counted 100% as an individual dwelling unit, not as for the commercial aspect of multifamily. With that being said, I believe that applicant still owed the town, with that, in our perspective, 9 acres, or the fee in lieu of whatever that dedication would be. Tonight, we're addressing some of that issue and clarifying that perspective of what that allocation must be within, and codifying, essentially, what I think will benefit the public interest moving forward. With that said, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And the motion was seconded for the meeting minutes, and I wanted to go ahead and move forward with making the recommendation of all those in favor for the meeting minutes. Any objections?
Aye.
All those in favor, thank you. Bellevue, welcome. So glad you can join us. Thank you very much. No problem. I totally understand. Moving on here, we have general public comments. We did have one general public comment here. Todd Dinchek, I believe. Thank you.
If I would be allowed to hand a presentation, I did kill one tree. It was a small tree, but if I would go ahead and
if you
count past.
Thank you, John.
If I have more than...
John, would you leave a copy with Lauren?
All right, well, thank you. As Daniel mentioned, my name is Todd Dinchek. Just for a little bit of background, I'm the president of the Waxhaw Athletic Association, so I do appreciate the young one being here tonight. Wanted to talk a little bit about some of the parks, and I believe this ties in with the Emerson Park and some of the parks that are allocated to sports and youth athletics. So this is a great tie-in. On the presentation here, just a little bit of background as you guys kind of thumb through there. I'm not going to reference pages or anything like that, but what I wanted to highlight is that we are about to celebrate our 45th anniversary, so we've been around for a very long time. Our main hub is actually located over at Nesbitt Park. And as you thumb through some of the pages, you're going to see on, let's see, I thought they were numbered. I apologize. I think they are, but some of the page numbers might be hidden by the pictures. On the third page where it says Waxhaw Athletic Association, I'm sorry, the fourth page, you'll see where you've got some of the dirt that is outside of the field fences. That happened recently. We put $60,000 of infield dirt on one of our baseball diamonds during some of the rain over at Nesbitt, which is in a floodplain. That infield dirt was actually relocated by Mother Nature to the outside of the baseball diamond. That $60,000 of dirt cost us an additional $20,000 to relocate it back onto the fields. On the next page, you'll see dedication, just one of the things that we that highlight some of the the parents and the volunteers. We have a 13-member board. We actually literally put out pumps so we can clear some of the water off of the diamonds there. We do have some adults that come out and play as well, but we try to clear as much of the water that we can. The next page, which is page 6. You'll see that we have professional turf management, but it's really hard to get to when it's covered in 2 or 3 feet of water. Again, because we are on a floodplain and that's our main place to play baseball, one of the only places to play baseball, it gets really difficult. We have the resources to do better, which is on page 7. Another field that's highlighted there. We have a cluster of 4 fields out at Nesbitt Park, all in that floodplain. The next page, page 8, why haven't we been given the chance that we were, why haven't we been given the chance that we were once when Millbridge was first built? So Nesbitt Park was actually gifted to Waxhaw Athletic Association originally. And I apologize, I'm trying to speak very quickly to get my 3 minutes in. The kids don't really deserve to play on the fields that are flooded. We'd really like to be able to get in line and have the planning committee consider us when land is dedicated and gifted, or fields in lieu, or parks in lieu, to when these developments come up. The next one, Field 1, I tried to be funny there. We do have registration for our WA synchronized swim team, as well as our scuba team coming soon when we flood out over there. You'll see another picture on page 11, our baseball field number 2. Those are our bleachers that our parents sit on that you can barely see over the surface of the water there. I think I've made my point there, but we do want to partner with the town. We would like to have fields of our own that we can call our own. We do the maintenance of Nesbitt Park on our own. We pay for that on our own, but we do hire that out. We do use professionals. We're not out there mowing the grass on our own or anything like that. But that all comes out of Waxhaw Athletic Association's pocket. So we do take care of that on our own. So just want to say thank you. See if there are any questions, that you guys would like to ask or anything. But really appreciate the opportunity to speak today and be considered whenever any of these come up. So, Daniel, any questions or anybody else?
Yeah, with it being general public comments, we typically don't do a back and forth. So
Got it. No problem.
What I will do, though, from my perspective, if this is okay, and if anybody else would like to join me, I'd be happy to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you and talk about this.
That would be great.
I have great interest in this, just knowing how I grew up in the athletic fields and the municipal fields that I played on, being and where I came from.
He would have to do that as a citizen and not a member of the planning
As a
board.
citizen, I'd be happy to have a coffee with
Because
you.
this is not a purview of the
Yeah.
planning board. Only the board of commissioners can determine how the fees are spent from fees in lieu.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlie. As a citizen, I'd be happy to sit down and have a coffee with you.
Absolutely.
So if anybody else wants to, as a citizen, join me in having a cup of coffee, be happy to take a look.
Yep.
This is interesting to me as a citizen.
Yeah, and by the way, our board meetings are open to the public, so if you'd like to attend one of our board meetings and see kind of what we talk about and how we're planning things, we would like to start a capital campaign as well. So, feel free. You're more than welcome to join us. All right. Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate the time.
Charlie, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
It's always good to have citizen commentary and citizen coffee.
Moving on and closing out general public comment unless anybody else has any additional from the audience this evening. Being no one else from the audience, I'd like to go ahead and... Oh, sure. Penelope.
As a citizen, is there any contact information here? Could you provide your... I saw your name, but is there any contact or email here? Thank you.
Thank you. Closing general public comment, moving on to old business. Being none, I'd like to go ahead and move on to item F, new business. We have the representative to serve on the OAB. The OAB, which is our individual appointees that will be facilitating and assisting with staff the interview process for some possible vacant positions coming up here in the near future. I know myself, my term will be ending here this year. I'm still speaking with my family if we will be reapplying at this time. But moving on, I'd like to go ahead and open that floor up for appointments. If anybody has any.
Yep, so both Daniel and Deepa are chair and vice chair, so they usually are automatically the OAB representative for the town. Because both of their terms are up, we have a conflict, so we'll have to nominate somebody to handle that position besides Daniel and Deepa. Just one.
I nominate John.
I'd like to go ahead and I'd like to second that. All those in favor of John? Thank you very much. Aye.
Don't I have to accept first?
No.
Thank you, that's very generous. Yeah, I accept that.
That yeah, no, voluntold in this position, my friend. Thank you, John. Appreciate you serving. With that, I'd like to go ahead and move on to a preview of our conservation development design ordinance and policy we've been working here. Staff has been doing a great job on working on some of our zoning charts to make it essentially follow along. We can follow along essentially with the staff and how we want to benefit here from preserving more habitat and wildlife.
Thank you, Chairman Ferris. So over the last 2 years, this has been one of the planning staff's goal is to create this conservation subdivision ordinance. We got the blessing again this year from the board. Go ahead and move forward. We had Randall Arndt here for a workshop a few months back, and we used his guide to create the ordinance and policy that's in your packet this evening. Just a reminder, a conservation subdivision is at least 50% open space, and it's density neutral. So they have to do a yield plan to see what they would normally get. And then they would take that plan and preserve 50% open space, but keep that same density, same number of homes. Advantages to the developer, saves them on infrastructure, but it also saves us on maintenance costs, especially for roads. Other benefits are connected wildlife, better storm water runoff through natural vegetation, creates a sense of place, just creates a better subdivision designing around these open spaces. So on the left, you have your typical conventional subdivision. If you drew a bunch of lot lines in there, it would be, if that was all forested, it'd be clear cut and detained by a detention pond. And on the right, same number of homes, but conserving over 50% of the land. He has a 4-step process that he identifies that is also written in our guide and policy. Step 1 is first doing a site walk, identifying that area that you want to save as your primary and secondary open space, and then actually designing around that versus just, carving out the floodplain and drawing as many lots as possible. You're actually designing around a usable open space. You then identify the lots, create the road system, and then add the lot lines last. So there's 2 documents in your packet this evening. You have the ordinance that goes over the purpose, the applicability, your procedures. We're going to include a pre-application process where we walk them through this type of review. And it's also going to include a sketch plan. So we'll do an on-site visit, we'll have their site analysis and resource plan, and we'll overlay kind of a sketch plan and start drawing out through a charrette process the open space areas we want to design around, and that's where they move on from. After that, then they would start the preliminary plat process that goes to you all like a conventional subdivision. The ordinance also talks about the dimensional standards, the ownership and protection of those open spaces. It includes a management plan of those open spaces. It's not just your typical wooded areas, but there's, if it's an archaeological site or different kinds of fields, it actually has a management plan for the HOA to set them up for success, and then the legal instrument for permanent protection. And then the policy has your primary conservation areas. Those are, always your wetlands, floodplains, steep slopes. You can't develop on those anyways. But then it guides you through your secondary conservation areas. So if a site has a good scenic view, I live at Marvin Road and Audrey Kell, and coming into Union County, you see trees, and you have the Firethorn Country Club right there. Right there, you want to save, a view shed of trees kind of entering into a property. It kind of guides you how to do that. So you can pick, what's important to that piece of property through a site walk.
If you don't mind me adding one here, I'm not sure where it would fit, if it would be secondary conservative areas or maybe design processes. But I'd also like to reiterate in finding ways in the design process of setting out areas where there may be terminal vistas, essentially within the developing of the streets, essentially where a neighborhood may end in something where it just doesn't fall away into itself. It's in more homes to maybe it ends into some form of terminal vista that peeks into, views into those conserved areas, farm, wetlands, natural areas.
So he's talking about, so if I'm driving up, along this lane, and my car lights are, pointed this way, maybe this is open space here, so you're not, you're coming into a subdivision and looking at open space, or when you're taking a turn, having a terminal vista around the corners. Yes, that's something he has language on and should be in there. I don't know if I saw that.
I know we glossed over it, but it was something that I took away, that I was like, how do we incorporate this more? How do we, especially, there's always areas that we're going to have to, there's going to be some mitigation with on the properties. There's going to be some requirements of some watershed control and some BMPs areas, and making sure that if those do come into play, how are those incorporated in, and can those be then capitalized on to be some form of terminal vista adding into what's existing?
And not even like a fountain. To a pond.
To
You're-
a pond,
when you're
and
walking,
that
when
falls
you're coming
way
in,
back
yep.
into the existing wetlands where there's a trail set behind that.
Or some kind of accessory gazebo structure, something besides a house.
Yeah, something besides another house and just a standard BMP.
Yeah. You, Blair, you need to be on the mic.
Please join us with the microphone.
This is the kind of stuff that we spend months and months talking about when you're getting a landscape architecture degree. Those are design decisions, and I think the term view shed, the scenic views, that is included. That kind of idea is included in this design. What you're describing is included within scenic views. There are other ways to do it as well, but having having the design set up so that you're not only preserving those lands, but that you're bringing the view of those lands into the neighborhood itself.
Value added.
That's all. I mean, that's not something so much that planners figure out. That's for the landscape architects, the designers, to actually work into the site and to show how that works.
So it's more of than falling, not so much of secondary conservation areas, more of a design process, and then highlighting, making sure that we.
Well, it's both, because you're on the one hand preserving that secondary, or sometimes it's, you know, it could also be a primary conservation area, but you're also preserving the view to it and designing the neighborhood so that it makes the most of that. Because you think about it, you could have a conservation subdivision where you have the community and it's all facing inward, and you have this huge preserved area that they don't really see.
Yeah.
And that's maybe not the best design. It still preserves that area, but it doesn't give maximum benefit to the people living there. So that's something that you want to consider as you're designing one of these communities. But again, that's for the developer, the architect, to put their best efforts into. And if we see a design that we feel is missing out on that, we'll certainly comment on that. We can guide them on that. Sometimes that's what I like to do the most, is to guide them in those decisions, if we feel like they're not getting the most out of it. But in the end, it's their design, and you know, they're presenting it. We don't design it for them. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the additional information.
The last part of this is it was asked of us to create an R2 district, so 2 units per acre, or 20,000 half-acre lots. So we did that. In addition, we added a conservation district to each zoning. So we have R1 by right, conventional, and then you have the option to do R1 conservation. We added the R2, R2 conservation, R3. We are getting rid of our cluster provisions. So the cluster, as it is now, gives you a density bonus. So you can go from 3 units to an acre to 3.5. If you provide more open space, we're not seeing the benefits of the open space provided for the density given. So we are looking to strike the R3 cluster. So we'll have an R3 and an R3 conservation, so no density bonus. R4, R4 conservation, and then up to NC. We also have the little asterisk. Randall talked about the garages being set back, not having those garages up front, so you're going down the street and just seeing garage, car. We're making that a minimum of 20 feet. That's our driveway standard anyways, to be able to park a car in the driveway, plus your garage parking. So we're saying all garages have to be a minimum of 20 feet setback. This is for review only. I'm hoping we can get comments back from you guys over the next 2 weeks. We are looking for a recommendation at the next meeting so we can get this moving forward, as we have subdivisions left and right coming down the pipeline. So happy to answer any questions.
Lisa, do you mind going back to the chart? Perfect. Just wanted anybody to take a second look here. If there's any recommendations, I know staff has done a really good job here of coming up with some details within this conservation and how to address essentially, I know what we talked about, and making sure that there was some good guidelines on setbacks in when you're coming in tighter. So like, I'll give you an example that I'm thinking of, and Lisa, please feel free. I'm looking at R2 conservation, so R2C, side setback. So this would be side to side from dwelling unit to dwelling unit. We need 5 feet between structure or property boundary.
Property line to structure.
Property line to structure.
So 10 feet total
So
between the two buildings.
So 10. Perfect. So we've got a total of 10 feet between each dwelling unit, which that also gives us some safety wiggle room, because that also provides us some fire protections between the dwelling units, because the closer you come together, there's different considerations with fire protection and how that is needs to be addressed from the setbacks in each unit's own fire rating. Sometimes they have to do additional fire protections the closer they get. Correct?
So his recommendation is like 50% from the front setback is your, you have 30 feet for your R1, so 50% of that is 15, 25 down to 12 and a half. For his side, he's saying 60%, but that breaks down pretty quickly going from an R1 to an R2. We immediately kind of lose that, but 5 feet minimum
Okay.
for fire. So.
Yeah. So those setbacks come into play here, and I think that was something that we talked about, is just making sure that there was appropriate setbacks between each dwelling structure when it comes into that conservation subdivision. Can you go over one more time, how are the garages going to be? We talked about having the garages more of that set, like rear carriage style, to where it's a little bit, the garage is going to be a setback an additional percentage from.
Yep, so
I don't know if they're going to be detached.
Doesn't necessarily have to be detached.
no, they're not required, but when you do have a garage, it has to be set back a minimum of 20 feet. So if your front setback is only 15, your house can come up to 15 feet from the property line. The garage would then have a 5-foot recess.
So
The garage has to be 20 feet. Or it could be side-loaded, but if you have a front-loaded garage, you have to have that minimum recess.
So side-loaded, additional recess, or carriage style, to where the garages are in the rear behind the setback
That would
behind
be
the
allowed.
property line. And then we have ordinances to address that and push it that way here, which I believe is within our benefit when coming in clustering. The only thing that I gotta say that I want to double check on is, so 3 stories maximum building height, it does not apply to RTC. That's my.
I would carry that across 3 stories for all zoning districts.
Anybody have any? No.
Okay, yep.
Okay. This is
One
just
more-
reviews and a vote
Yeah.
on this.
No, one more question.
Okay.
This is for, this chart was for just the setbacks between the houses and the road, or the streets inside of the subdivision. Did we see something where, is it listed out in the text, the or a minimum setback of the first home from the main entrance or anything like that,
We don't have any.
where you can't see? I mean, if this is like conservation and you're into Vista sight lines and stuff like that, do we want to see any homes from the street or anything like that? Is that going to be in the text?
So that for that driveway cut, how far are we pushing these homes back off on that main drag?
Right, so like commercial, you have your internal stem requirements of at least 100 feet. I don't know.
I don't have a personal preference. I'm just wondering if that's in the text.
I think it could be site specific, but at the same time, we need to find a way to make sure that there should be a preservation of the first the first. I don't know. Blair, can you step in and
Residential plat.
Can you make a comment? I know you have something. I see you over there.
A standard for
Each
where
site is different.
Yep.
And there may be a situation where the homes are best suited so that they face an existing street.
And
And that the
conservation.
conservation area is behind them.
And it's all conditional, correct, Lisa?
We have not decided.
There's no buy right at this
yet.
time.
We don't have
So
that in there
I
yet.
recommend then, if it's all conditional for right now, we can probably
Have a say on that.
have a say and address it there. If it's not, we need to address it as we massage through our first project, probably on this.
So the warning we got from Weddington, we had these 150-foot, we called them view shed buffers along all the major corridors. And he's like, why are you setting that aside automatically? Like, your good open space land that you want to face the homes around is actually, you know, in the back. Don't waste your 50% up front along the road if that's a pasture, or
Yeah.
if you want to save the pasture, you want to front the homes and have the internal collector street along the front. So,
Yeah, there's nothing inherent in this type of design method that says these need to be insular. I keep hitting that.
Because it's a
Insular
little-
communities.
Yeah, because
So
of
they
the
can be right in line with the rest of development seamlessly, but have that conservation area perhaps in the back. I just want to, you know, each one's going to be different, but that could be a circumstance.
There's also one thing in the procedures I'd like to bring up, and for you guys to think about, that you have that pre-application meeting, and then you have he used a very nice word for it, very fancy word for it, but it's a
charrette.
thank you, a sketch, a charrette. Thank you.
You're listening.
Can we get an informal preview of this charrette? Of the charrette in that process and procedures. The planning board, after that's done, gone through you guys, we get a preview.
That's something he recommends, is actually going on site with the site analysis maps, your floodplain and your open space, kind of picking out what's good about the site, and then immediately going into the office and taking the sketch plan
Look, I'm
paper
for
and start drawing it out.
the planning board budget for an ATV so we can do site visits. I'm all for it. I'll volunteer my extra time if that's the give and take.
Yeah, that's that was an important part of his presentation, so we'll make sure that's included.
All right, look, I'd be happy to do and participate in site specific and do some of the walkthroughs that you talked to, if that's really what we're pursuing. I just know that also as we go through this, you might want to think about having something on the books of, okay, double it for the first cut on that first frontage. Just take your setbacks, double it. So if your setbacks, if your standard R1 is 30, your first cut back, just preserve somewhere in between the additional 50 and 60 feet in the front cut.
That's the
Maybe.
important part of this site. If you're coming into town and you like that wooded look,
Exactly.
let's kick a 50-foot buffer there. Sure.
Sure.
That's good for that site. If it's in the middle of town and we don't want that,
Then you don't want the 50 feet. I know. It's just one of those things that's like, hey, as a rule of thumb, we're going to, on that first cut, if it's appropriate and balanced, or but at the purview
some language.
at the purview of the zoning administrator, we're advising her to at least double the front cut when reviewing the applications.
Danielle on that, I agree, it's case specific, really you need us to do the site visit. I'm happy, that's part of my day job anyway.
Yeah, hey, I'll go. I'll do a sidewalk. Let's go. That sounds like fun.
That day,
We'll hijack a Park and Rec ATV.
Okay. Thank you all.
You realize an ordinance is going to be a little bit tough to do this when it says when appropriate. You have to give some guidelines.
I believe it's at the purview of the zoning administrator.
Wait, that-
For this first one, I'm
That
sure.
may or may not work either,
It-
from a delegation of authority.
True. That is our recommendation at this time, though, Charlie.
I understand. Somebody else is well.
Go ahead and I believe moving down, unless anybody else has any comments on this one. We've got a general rezoning RZ 015341-2024.
And this is going to be very simple and straightforward after wrestling with the concept of conservation.
That's what you think.
That's what I think. So, all right, so we'll just move right into it. 1020 Old Providence Road. I'll get you familiar with where the site is. There we go. All right, so you can see here, this is petition RZ 015341 for 2024. It's a request by applicant Matthew Kalinowski, who's in the audience with his family. And this is for a rezoning map amendment for parcel 05116019, and this is located at 1020 Old Providence Road. There's a picture of it there. From R3 residential to NC Neighborhood Center. The property is approximately 2.06 acres. I guess that's pretty precise, not just approximate. It's located on Old Providence Road at Arbor Drive, across from Waxhaw Elementary School. You can, if you take a look at that picture, Waxhaw Elementary School would be to the right. You can see the driveway to it. Beyond it, up the road, heading north, it would be the museum property where it abuts the road. To the left side, down Arbor Drive, is Southside Cemetery, and you can see the site there in the intersection. So, looking at it from a map view, you can see here on the left, this is a kind of Nolly diagram of the town where the buildings show up as black. You can see the school there down in the bottom right of that diagrammatic view. A star for where the parcel is. You can see the cemetery, NC 75, the mill. You can see it's not far from. This location is not far from uptown. I want to stress that. On the right in the aerial, the parcel is outlined in red. Again, you can see the school immediately to the right of it, the parking lot that's right there, the museum property just a little north of that, the cemetery, and also I want to point out the 1 acre pond that's close by. That's located within a 4.5 acre adjacent parcel to the northwest, directly to the east. Below that pond, there are 2 vacant parcels on Arbor Drive. And across Arbor Drive are single-family residents, and also going up Old Providence Road, single-family residents. So, putting that in simple color terms for zoning, you can see the subject property again there in red. It's currently zoned R3, and just want to make the rounds. Everything yellow there, R3 residential. The museum itself is R4 residential. And then the school is located in R1 residential, and all the single family is R1 to the south of the site across Arbor Drive, and to the west you see Southside Cemetery again, R1 residential. So that's the current zoning. And what we're looking at here is the Waxhaw 2040 plan, a snippet out of the future land use map on the left. You can see kind of dull red star there. That's the parcel. Again, this is approximately 2 acre parcel, so you see it kind of makes sort of a big square. And I want to point out that as you go up Old Providence Road, that brown color, which in this map represents mixed use, that mixed use continues up Old Providence until you get to the downtown type zoning, the town center zoning, or I should say land use in this map. So you can see how it makes that connection to the town. Now, state law mandates that zoning be undertaken with consideration of a comprehensive land use plan, and that a consistency statement be prepared and approved for every zoning amendment. And so this, again, is making reference to the Waxhaw 2040 future land use map. And so that's what we need to be consistent with in this decision. I want to go into a little more detail. As you see there on the right, this is the section that describes mixed use, the brown area, that's taken directly out of the 2040 comp plan. You can see the principal uses. There's a number of them listed there. It's not an exhaustive list, but you can see that there's quite a variety, hence mixed use. Smaller scale though, neighborhood scale, whether it's offices or retail or services, could be civic or institutional buildings, and then you have a variety of residential that could also go in there. We'll talk more about the conditions of when residential is allowed in these. There's some strict guidelines to follow. We'll look at that in a second. The overall purpose is just to provide an alternative to the auto-oriented commercial centers. In other words, if there's retail here, that's a different way of doing retail rather than just having to drive into a big parking lot and get out and go to a big box store. This provides a neighborhood opportunity. People could walk to it. It helps create these little centers of activity that are convenient to neighborhoods at logical places, and having them along a main road like Old Providence and along at an intersection has a lot of historical precedent for that kind of thing. Another opportunity that we see for these mixed-use zones is that they can architecturally express the identity of the town, which means that we're very, very stringent about the review of these plans, architectural plans. They have to meet our design code that is made to emulate or recall some of the downtown. And what that does is that it helps give the town, as these nodes are developed, an overall consistent identity, so that you know you're in Waxhaw. You know, you go to this little corner, oh, that's a Waxhaw development. You know, architecture has a great power to do that. Again, the conditions for doing this: strategically located, neighborhood scale nodes composed of mix of uses, and a design to fit harmoniously with the surrounding residential neighborhoods. It's all about scale, style, being pedestrian friendly. So let me go on. You want to stop me there? Okay.
One of the things that I know that has been part of something that we've been in discussion with, this got brought up with the property specifically for the applicant on the DeWitt. They asked for a variance, which triggered, I believe, was part of the layering of why they triggered a conditional use. They wanted to reduce the parking calculation required for their mixed-use development. In NC zoning, this will be a mixed-use property. It's meant to be an infill of some commercial aspect with the possibility of some residential. But I would like to bring back to staff here that before we do any parking maximums or we do any parking calculation adjustments, I think we really need to look at, because I live in front of the Moss and Black property there at 3808 Providence, and that property now has enough activity at 100% occupancy where it is flowing over from the actual allocated parking into a small offset of what would be a street that was originally designed and developed around for residential traffic and traffic patterns, and did not take into account the additional pocket neighborhood commercial aspects. So I would hope that staff would also just make sure that they do an additional due diligence when we are looking at these proposed zonings, where there's these pockets that we actually still maybe reinforce and or take maybe a second look at, and maybe of where we have our ratios allocated for different types of business uses. A hair salon actually requires 2 people on a regular basis per employee. So it doubles the use or parking ratio for that business type, requiring additional parking. But NC zoning allows for a hair salon or barbershop that it actually needs, and it consumes more parking than it actually. So those are things that I think we need to take a second look at with these neighborhood centers, and I hope that staff would maybe take that in consideration here. That brought up that, and I felt like was an appropriate segue into evaluating when we were looking at NC zoning, something like that.
Well, those are good general concerns for the NC zoning district in general. To be redundant, I want to continue, if I could, to just present this particular project, but keeping in mind that there are a lot of factors, parking, a lot of different needs that we need to make sure the NC district is appropriate wherever it's used and has that thought behind it. So definitely agree, and that might be, I believe we'll be coming, I hope that we'll be coming before you again at some time not too distant future to talk about parking minimums and maximums and what would work best. So I think that concern will fall well into that particular discussion. But yeah, good to point that out in its application here. I want to speak more generally about neighborhood zoning, neighborhood center zoning for the moment, and then sort of look a little bit more at the site. The mixed-use zones that are described or shown in that future land use map, the way we accomplish those mixed-use zones, or the way they're brought about, is through the neighborhood center zoning. So those 2 terms are used interchangeably, whether you're talking about the future land use map versus a zoning ordinance map. So the Land Development Code spells out the intention and requirements of the Neighborhood Center NC zoning in Chapter 4. You can see the specific cut sheet on Neighborhood Center over here to the right. There is a general description given. A lot of it we've already talked about, but you see that in the upper left there. You see some sample pictures. You see the setbacks and other requirements in terms of dimensional standards and such in the table there. Over to the right of that, some primary uses, although there's many uses that could go into the Neighborhood Center zoning, but you see some ones that are going to be very popular in those. And then at the bottom, we'll go into that in a little more detail in a second, but because it's critical to understand, these are special notes that have to do with residential uses that are within NC mostly. I do, before I go to that though, I want to point out that there's buffers required when you have NC zoning next to either an R1 or an R3. In this case, it would be R3 zoning. And you can see there that it's the minimal buffer that's required. It's only a 10-foot buffer, but it has to be well planted, or that can be, or it can be a wall, or it can be a combination of the two. But you can see here in the description, 10 feet wide minimum landscape area, having 3 trees for every 100 linear feet, 20 shrubs. And again, you could do a zero width, based, theoretically zero width with an opaque fence or wall. So I just wanted to mention that the buffer requirements are there. But let's go back to the notes page on Neighborhood Center, and I want to just point out some specifics. This is text that's taken directly from there. For the non-residential buildings, there is a size limit there of 10,000 square foot buildings. For this site, I doubt that we would see a building that large, but 10,000 square feet, that's about the size of Town Hall. Town Hall is about 8,000 square feet, the out parcel right now, so that gives you some idea. But the most of this is concerning residential, and that is a very critical topic when we're talking about NC. As you can see, for multifamily residential, if you're going to have apartments or something, that can only exist on the second floor or above in the NC district. And that way, it's like the town center zoning. Other residential uses, we could talk about single family or duplex, triplex and such, cottages. If they're proposed, they have to be part of a mixed-use development where the residential and non-residential uses are proportionate in lot size, and this is reviewed by the staff and has to be approved by the zoning administrator on a case-by-case basis. Strictly residential projects, if they are proposed, first of all, we would discourage that, but if they are proposed, they require a conditional rezoning and they must follow the process of that. And so that means it would come before you again for recommendation or not, and go before the board for acceptance or denial. For single-family attached, the lot width can be no less than 60 feet, the way it works out. And for duplexes, triplexes, quadruplex, that's increased to 150% of that, so that'd be 90 feet. And the maximum residential density cannot exceed 8 units per acre for all residential uses. So I just wanted to go over that so that you're aware what the limitations are. But the main one, I think what's most important and what's going to come into play often is that they would go through a conditional rezoning process or have to be approved by the zoning administrator. So just something to keep in mind, because I know people get upset at the thought of, hey, it could be higher density housing in disguise. So that's taken into consideration. Let's see. I guess that just brings us to the consistency and reasonable statement. Staff does recommend the approval of this proposed general rezoning from R3 to NC. And as a general rezoning, I want to remind you that no conditions can be placed on the approval. We can talk about transportation issues. I have information on that if you have questions. But I just want to bring you here. I don't know if this is the proper time for questions or whether we just want to go through the consistency and reasonable statement at the moment. However you want to do it.
Let's go with questions.
Okay.
I'd like to go ahead and open it up here for any questions. John? Blair, do you mind jumping back for me here to the SAT overlay of the intersection? Did you have that?
Let's see. I
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
2.06 acres. What I wanted to point out here, I brought up the staff, White Blair has brought up the question regarding to me for the traffic issues is, I wanted to point out here that this property is located at what I feel like is a sensitive place that draws additional attention. And because it is a sensitive place in my mind, that draws additional attention, but we cannot put conditions on a mapping by right amendment.
Right. 100%.
So it's more of, I'm on the record that I would like staff to communicate to the BOC, and this is just on me at this time. If anybody else agrees, feel free. But with the school nearby, I ask that the BOC and the applicant be mindful of anything that we've been seeking for, and especially with the PED needs at the intersection of Old Providence being across from Wax Elementary. I know we have a striped intersection out there. At that point in that junction of Old Providence Road, I believe that it starts to open it up to where it is wide enough for a third lane, but sometimes stacking gets very busy there during the school year because the parents are trying to get there to pick up their kids, and the way the school is laid out at this time, we have to park on the road to get onto campus, to get into the car line. So if there's anything, especially in my mind, emphasizing pedestrian to the BOC, that could be evaluated. Rapid flashing beacons help keep our kids safe. I know it's been something that we've been trying to do up and down Providence Road, but I'd like to draw attention to that. Anything that could be done with enhanced curbage and or ADA compliant cuts in that intersection. I would like to emphasize that.
I can.
And all of that stuff that probably falls within our PED program that I'm sure Blair
It
can
exactly
talk about.
does. I just wanted to mention that this is already part of the pedestrian plan. This intersection is pointed out as project intersection 27, and it calls for crossing enhancements, including ramps, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons that you mentioned, which I can describe in more detail. The marked crosswalks, I think there'd be improvements to what's already there, along with the signage that's already there, and curb extensions as well. So those things are all described, pointed out in the pedestrian plan, anticipated in the pedestrian plan, along with sidewalk connections that would reach this intersection.
Ramp as a speed bump or ramp from the sidewalk?
A ramp for the sidewalk, yeah.
Yeah, if there was tabletop in that area, that would be real nice. If that was
It's
tabletop.
It's 25 through there right now?
That would let kids. That would let people know that that's a kid area.
Yeah.
Throwing it out there just for future planning purposes.
Well, what I should mention as well is the way our TIA system works, process works. A measurement is done of the existing traffic, and if that traffic exceeds 1,000 vehicles per day, or 100 vehicle trips at the peak hours, either morning hour or evening hour, then that automatically trips the need to do a traffic impact analysis. That
I don't think the 2 acres at this time, unless there's additional layers to this, that may or may not happen. That is perspective. I'm sure, as Charlie educates it, we have to look at all perspectives and possible uses. I don't think we're going to trip.
No, but we could still do
1,000 trips at this time. So that's why I'm trying to communicate now in front of the process before it gets too far down the line of, hey, draw attention to a plan that is in place for a pet safety, to just kind of flag it, for lack of better words.
And I want to mention too that it doesn't have to trip a TIA if it's deemed worth doing. We can do the traffic memo where the town does that. Well, it's still done by the consultant, but it's a less thorough process.
It's a condensed
It's a condensed version.
It's a micro snapshot in a sensitive area.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And if that's on the table, we'd love to communicate that as well.
Sure.
Hey, engineering, can we take a look at this? Can we get a micro TIA during this process?
Oh, absolutely.
Understanding though that we are in a by right mapping process that actually doesn't quite apply at this point, but yet at the same time, in my opinion, does.
One thing I could point out on the positive side is that the development of this property could trigger those improvements to be made, improvements that are already planned and adopted in the pedestrian plan, so they could help to bring these improvements to the ground where they're needed, or they may be needed already.
I would also like to ask to, if I could, to relay that, to communicate, could PD's there every day, directing traffic every day.
Sure, it's not unusual for a
Nope,
elementary school.
not unusual. Love to hear from them if they have a minute to come in. Not in this process, but again, trying to signal to the BOC, trying to signal, hey, like, can we, like, there's some concerns that we're trying to identify early, but we also respect essentially what we're going through in this formal process, which is slightly different. So, but yet we're sending a memo to essentially to y'all and staff and to the BOC.
And Blair, the way you frame this, it's non-conditional, then it's a commercial property. Is that what we're moving forward with?
We do not. We have to look at all possibilities that are on this list because it is a by right mapping
Yep,
request.
but if this were a residential development, we would guide the applicant to do a conditional zoning right up front instead of just by right, so.
Okay.
But that's in the, when a development plan comes along.
They're not in a development plan, and there's
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
nothing,
I understood.
nothing at this time, I believe. It's just they're going with. We advertised in a mapping change that this parcel kind of was the boundary of where where we project and see the end, and they are kind of that, and at that point where it's like, hey, yeah, their property and parcel, I believe, fits within the mapping scheme.
It does, and I do want to emphasize the future land use map, and you can see, granted it's just a little tiny window, but you can see the logic in how downtown is moving further, the business area is moving further down 75, and then can continue at a less dense rate along Old Providence, we feel, to Arbor Drive.
The plan has to start somewhere, so you're saying this is pretty much the first domino of
You
a
could put it
plan.
that way. It's yeah. I think
it would flow
be
back into town. I
Sure.
believe.
Yeah.
This would be a cornerstone flowing back down Old Providence to Ethel and McCain, back towards down, the mill and Emmett's that way.
one thing that we try to do with the planning is just to recognize the market principles that are already there, the urban principles that are there, and try to work with that rather than say, no, it's never going to happen. There's never going to be development here, and we're going to stop it at all. It's not realistic.
I'm sure Ashley still has a waiting list of prospective.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're grossly underbuilt for any kind of retail, or there's no space right now, and that space is much in demand.
And that's why I get it. It's a give and take in this process. But at the same time, it's like I know I wanted to voice something for myself, and staff. I ran it by staff, and they were fully in support of that, and so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and also just to look at the big picture of the town. We've been focused on this particular property, but it has importance town-wide because look at our tax base. We need more non-residential development to occur, to have a tax base that can support what Waxhaw, the services that Waxhaw provides, and the tax base that, the cost of living in Waxhaw, to help keep that down. We need non-residential development. It certainly helps. And also we need more local jobs. We need more to hold people here rather than it just being a bedroom community. And that's not my judgment, that's the judgment from all the public input work that we've been doing since I've been here in the last 4 or 5 years. That's what we're hearing. We hear it over and over again. So this is, if we're listening to the public, this is one of those decisions that helps meet that public demand.
TIA, I felt a lot better. Knew that was going to be triggered. Harbor Drive's awkward, to say the least.
Yeah.
The first time I ever drove through there, I thought I was driving to somebody's house. 'Cause it doesn't, it feels like a drive. It doesn't feel like a road. So, I get it.
that's why it's a plan. You know, it doesn't have to be just the very next one each time. It's like it's within the plan, so it makes sense and it fills in. And it's okay that there's residential to the north and the south and the east and the west. You know, when you have a neighborhood center, that's what they're for, is to serve those local residents. It doesn't have to be connected physically to downtown for it to really function and serve as it should.
Remind me, what's the half circle that's like?
Oh, well, yeah, I like I said, it's a snippet, but that bit of circle, that's the downtown center, basically. So when you look at the big future land use map, you guessed it, didn't you? You have the downtown center, and then you have these little neighborhood centers, and then you have employment centers. So that just keeps that circle. So you can see it's right on the edge of that downtown center. Yet again, appropriate development within the planning.
Out of curiosity, the Waxhaw Parkway, it was gonna terminate on Old Providence, somewhere south of Waxhaw Elementary?
Ultimately, that's what we'd like to see. Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's on the plan like that.
It's south.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I know.
Anybody have a motion?
Consistency and reasonable statement. This rezoning is, I make a motion to approve this request and is consistent with the Waxhaw 2040 future land use map and is reasonable in the public interest as the parcel is a large corner lot along a busy north-south connector road and it will provide diversity to the tax base.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Staff, thank you for taking the additional time to hear my concerns and help me convey those to the BOC during the process.
I just want to ask, and Charlie, I'll ask you, do they need to make the motion of this statement? I guess that is the same thing that she just did.
Yeah.
Okay. I
She
just wanted to-
started it with,
Okay,
yep.
that was my question.
We did believe we did a combined
good.
motion.
Zoning be
All right.
approved.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie.
She called herself right. Yeah, you got it.
Moving on, I believe we're coming down here to text amendment TA 0152024 for parks and open space dedication in fee in lieu.
Right. Again. TA 15-2024, it's a request by the town planning department to amend section 8.9 open space, that is our fee in lieu section, to not only have single family major subdivision units included, but to also include single family attached and multifamily units to that parkland fee in lieu requirement. 160D 804 is that enabling statute that allows the town to require this contribution of parkland or fee in lieu. Again, it has to be based on that tax value. Over the last year, we updated that's the fair market value at the time of final plat, and that can be a mix of funds and land dedication. We first adopted that text in 2022. It included a parkland fee in lieu requirement for all major subdivisions. We had been telling all developers that they were required to do this fee in lieu, and we were caught by a multifamily applicant who mentioned that our ordinance specifically stated major subdivision, which is your single family lots. Town attorney agreed that that's what the ordinance states, so we would have to update that to include multifamily types of development. In addition, I wanted to change the rate at which they're required to donate land. This was brought up at the U.S. Supreme Court, like Dolan versus City of Tigard. It has to be roughly proportional. So single-family homes have more persons per unit than a single-family attached or a multi-family dwelling. So I used, I think the town of Apex had a very good description of all those units as percentages of. So we are doing for single-family detached 1/35th of an acre per home or unit. For single-family attached, 1/52nd, and multifamily is 1/59th of an acre. Or you would take that amount of land and do the tax value of that land for a payment or fee in lieu. I mentioned this before. He said, why not Millbridge? I wish we had this when Millbridge was developed. That would be a 60-acre parkland donation for Millbridge. We'd have 30 acres from Lawson. So if we had this in the past, we would be more caught up. We probably, I heard a stat, it's like 1 acre per 100 people, so we don't even have half the acreage of parkland that we should for a town of our size. So we have a lot to catch up on, and I know that's a goal of the town. With every text amendment or zoning, we have the reasonableness and consistency statement, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions.
If y'all don't mind here for a second, Lauren, do you mind pulling up the PDF that I sent? If
Everyone has a
possible,
copy.
or if everybody has
If
a
you want to
copy.
start talking, I'll see if I can get that from my email.
Something that I ran by, something that I ran by
Yeah.
Lauren. Sorry, thank you, Lauren. Something that I ran by staff and Lisa specifically is I've been going through and the city of Kannapolis, which I feel has some comparables to Waxhaw, where we've been and where we maybe hope to be in the future. And being focused here on the fee in lieu, something that I've came across within their ordinance that I've brought to Lisa that I wanted to bring here in front of y'all, is that they have for developments, essentially when they flow back into large subdivisions on the call-outs, that where the parkland comes into question, or when the applicant goes more towards the financial side of the fee in lieu, such improvement shall equal the total minimum financial investment of 200% of the pre-development tax value for the amount of dedicated land, and then will be applicable to the improvements to make them active instead of just passive land, like the 10 acres previously that were in our downtown area, where it was parkland in our parkland inventory, but it was undeveloped. It was unrealized because we did not currently have the funds to develop it. We currently just finished that amazing new park, but it was at quite an expense and an expenditure of not only just dollars, but our own parks team and the man hours that have been dedicated to help open that up. Our future maintenance requirements that will go in for that active park space. And so how do we address those needs? How do we capture parkland, but yet if someone's going to take a cash option, we still have to then have the now requirements to expend more hours to find replacement parkland, to come up with a park policy for that possible acquisition, and we need to then develop out that parkland.
And the acquisition cost later will be more.
Yes, thank you. The acquisition cost of that parkland needs to be calculated, in my personal opinion.
That's been a discussion with most municipalities, but what you do is you hold it in trust. And every time you have a development that's going to feed in lieu, it goes into those trust funds. So by the time you town is ready to either develop a park or buy or acquire land for a park, it has this trust fund of fees and lieu sitting there. But that's growing, even though costs may appreciate. In the future, your pot of gold here is growing also, so that you're able to sustain those new costs. So, and there may be some general funds involved, but you've got a large sum of dedicated in fees and lieu here to develop a really nice park. So you can kind of keep up with the rising costs by you don't save that one fee and lieu by itself. You develop a fund in your kind of like a capital reserve fund, and you develop these into the pile of money. And then when you're ready to build a park or ready to improve land already you had hoped to make a park, you've got the funds necessary to carry out that endeavor. It's not just holding this sum of money here and that sum of money here. You create a pool of funds.
Understood. I think you just kind of put yourself behind the 8 ball a little bit if you're going to keep it as a snapshot of that one
Just the raw
time
land.
frame
Of just
on the front end.
Of just the raw land dedication or acquisition. of-
Yeah, I mean the
of
200%. I'm not.
I mean, and that is Kannapolis's number. That is not my number.
Who am I to argue with Kannapolis? It's generous. I mean, it's.
But at the same time, I was like, this conversation needs to be had because there's some costs associated when it comes that we're not planning for appropriately, in my personal opinion. That needs to be discussed.
Well, I think it's.
And we can, and I feel like it is within the public interest, and I believe that the law allows us to write our ordinance and structure it in a way where we can recoup this in this structure. I believe Kannapolis is correct.
So they're saying for active open space, so right now we have like a 20% open space requirement for an R3 subdivision, 15% of that has to be active. So that could be a trail. If that trail is being donated to us, it has to be built, and that construction of that trail has to be the 200% of the pre-development tax value to make sure we're getting an active recreational land.
So if the applicant
To make
was
it worth our
going to owed us 2 miles of a trail system. Okay, 2 miles of a trail system. Let's go with, if you don't mind, 12-foot buffers and boundaries. All right, and they owed us that trail system, and we then had to go acquire the land to replace that trail system. That didn't happen. Or how about the maintenance associated once that trail system is absorbed? There is a general cost. Or what if the applicant decides not to put in benches because they don't want to add that programming cost? Well, don't you think that benches in certain areas would be appropriate? I think that this covers this, especially if the applicant is taking a cash option and not programming the trail.
But if you're looking at, excuse me for stepping, if you're looking for a specific type of trail or a specific type of park property or benches or whatever, you don't have to, the Board of Commissioners does not have to allow the fee in lieu. If you've got a site that you need that 10-foot wide multi-use path to go across, you're not going to approve the rezoning just on the fees in lieu.
I agree.
So you're going to make them put it in on that property.
I agree.
It's just that you come into times where it is.
What if the
at
applicant
heart,
says, I just want to take the cash option, Charlie? Or
that's not his choice.
it's our choice, correct?
That it has to be agreed upon by the Board of Commissioners.
Yeah. So it's our choice if we take that cash.
Well, it is, because see, remember a development agreement, whether you call it a conditional zoning or whether it's a separate development agreement, it's between two parties. Both have to agree.
The variances. They have
So
to agree to
we
the
do not have to agree to give up that 10-foot multi-use path because that the developer doesn't want to put it in. No, if you want your zoning, you've got to include that in your site plan, and you've got to put it in.
But if a developer owed us, and I'm just picking a number here, somewhere between 5 acres and 6 acres of parkland, and they wanted to say, hey, instead of that parkland, that 5-6 acres, we're going to give you all 5-6 acres, and allocated fee in lieu.
That's still up to the commissioners.
It goes up
It's
to the
still up to the
commissioners.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
that.
No, that's not a unilateral decision by the developer.
So then we have every right to write our ordinance.
Well, exactly.
In this fashion.
But when
that
you start writing ordinances saying
that it's not only,
where we need to have
We need a
future coverage, you're going to run into the potential of having what would be called an impact fee.
unless we list out,
An impact fee has been declared by the U.S. Supreme Court as being unconstitutional. There are certain exceptions. In North Carolina, we have one area where we can have future impact, and that is water and sewer systems. That's the only area where we can have future impact.
One other thing to think about is this is in addition to our open space and active recreation. So if there's a trail identified on a plan, they would have to build it. Plus, give us the parkland or fee in lieu in that decision. It rests with you all. Putting a cap at 200% might be capping us. I mean, we could probably get more. Is it worth looking into? Sure.
it was just the number. And
Yep.
it was what Kannapolis used, but this is what I feel like essentially we need. We need a tool in our toolbox that says that, hey, this needs to happen in a serious manner of saving our parklands and this open space. And if the municipality is going to do it, there is a cost associated with that, and that needs to be essentially inputted into the formula. To essentially, my personal opinion.
So you take this original, or this formula that's on the second page, and just multiply it by 2.
I mean, that's what
The simple theoretical example that's on.
So if an
You
applicant,
start getting into, though, legal interpretations and court making those interpretations instead of you.
well, I
And
believe
a
that
court can say, no, you've gotten over it, you've gone beyond.
from a recommending body, I believe it's worth that exploration to at least bring it.
Oh, I'm not saying you don't want to step, but all I'm saying is there's some caveats out here, and red flags jumping all in my mind right now.
Yep, and so that's why for me, I want to bring this forward.
Can I address that one second? We can have this simple theoretical example that's here with the calculation. 1/35 of an acre times the tax value per acre times the proposed number of lots divided by 35.
Which that would be
yeah.
my recommendations things lots, because of the way that the dwelling units and the verbiage falls there. I would make sure that verbiage is tweaked a little bit to be a little more in line.
Well, okay, but
yeah,
to Charlie's point, whether it's 1 times that calculation or 2 times that calculation, I mean, are you saying it's subjective to
What I'm
the
saying is this
board?
formula is pretty much used by most municipalities right now. This 1/35 of an acre.
Okay.
And it has passed muster so far.
But if somebody
It
wants
has
to
to
go,
be proportionate
Yes.
to the impact that those residents are causing. So if you
Understood.
I did the
And I
math
know
like
that's
for
why it was
100
written that way in the
like,
first place.
if it's a 100-unit subdivision,
I'm trying to,
100 acres.
I mean, this is slightly political, right? I mean, that we're doing, I won't want to make assumptions for everybody, but that's the area that we operate in, is the gray area. So if somebody, for lack of a better term, is getting away with 200% in their ordinance, I don't know if they get it.
They're saying that the portion that they build has to be worth 200%. So the building out of the active open space.
or if they choose the fee in lieu, that is also
They're
that-
getting
that-
2
that-
times the tax value.
yes.
That's
If
how
they
I
choose
read it.
the fee in lieu, that the build out is calculated including the
I just want to cut to the chase, because we're doing this for the public too, and it's good for everybody to have the same understanding. That's actually, I mean, if somebody out there is
that's the way I read it, and that's why
getting
I want
200%, then if there's a gray area somewhere between 200 and 100%,
150%. Fine.
That's something worth exploring.
But tax value, even though sometimes it's woefully undervalued and sometimes it's,
Dreadfully
You go
undervalued
through
for 8 years.
evaluations,
8
reevaluations.
8 years suppressed.
yes. But now most people now going to 4, they've learned their lessons now, not to go so long.
I know, but
However,
our own county
but
suppressed
listen.
our tax evaluations for 8 years.
you are going to be able to survive an attack in court if you say the value of the property as determined by the tax value, because the government has to rely on that being the current value.
We are. It's rooted in the current value.
But 200% is not the current tax value. 100% of the tax value it would be. So I mean, there are the little nuances here that when you start playing with to try to get more money, that's cool, but you got to be real careful, because A, man, may look good, but you just took C and kicked your ordinance right out into the Atlantic Ocean. So be careful.
Understood.
It's worth exploring your conversation, because I think this is great. But just be aware that it's not as easy as you think it is in order to come up with a money producer.
I think, though, that was exactly, we're not trying to make a money producer. I think that's the key word there, Charlie, money producer.
It's not a revenue stream.
It's not a revenue stream.
It's
We're-
just
we're-
getting
we're-
paid
we're
for
offset- We're
what-
offsetting our costs to endeavor to essentially absorb the cash and then expand man hours, which is realized, and we can realize that. It's a realized expense, correct?
Yeah, but I'd be careful, because
I mean, and so
you're gonna you have a tax basis that goes to the town, and in theory, that could be paying for a bigger Parks and Rec department. So
yeah.
it's not like this is the only revenue stream that
No,
comes out of
but
it.
no, it's
I'm
not.
trying to look from if we're,
But from a parks standpoint, though, when the applicant takes the fee in lieu, it hurts us. It doesn't help us.
That's still going to be up to the Board of Commissioners whether they take it or not.
right.
That is true.
I mean, it requires their concurrence on that, and they're not just going to say, no, we'll take the fees in lieu. But there are times where there are hardships where an open space may just not, because of whatever, it's going to be a problem. So then the applicant can say, then I'll take fees in lieu, and the board can say, yeah, you're right, and we'll accept that, and then they put those fees over into your park funds, available funds for future park activity
Look, I know.
or open space.
I know there's some layers that like this thing has layers, and there are nuances to the ordinances. But and so for what Lisa's presented for me, and I'll just speak on this for myself again, I'm fine with what Lisa's moving forward with her proposed, and
Do a text amendment change later.
yeah, and we can do a text amendment change later, and I'm good with that. But I just felt like this is something that we need to advance on and move forward with here, and at least have that conversation at our level, so we can send it up to the BOC so they can have that conversation.
What you don't want to be is the town who had its case taken all the way to the United States Supreme Court and had legal fees that it cost them in the millions of dollars. So to get that extra 100% that you're advocating may just cost the town somewhere down the line $2 or $3 million worth of legal expenses.
I understand all that.
Got our marching orders, so we would need a motion?
Yep. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend the text changes for petition TA 015-2024. And based on the reasonable consistency statement, the text amendment request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future plan goals of the town of Waxhaw, and that it implements identified open space and parks projects in the adopted plans and is reasonable and in the public interest, as the text amendment helps accommodate the recreational needs of residents. It helps require the development of parks and greenways and expands the applicability of the fee in lieu system.
Change that around a little bit. Good.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Awesome, unanimous. Thank you very much.
We just like to see you get heated, Charlie. That's all. We just
No, it was good. That's what the planning
Just-
board's supposed to do.
No, I
Right, on the inchoate, condemnations. Both sides, the condemnor, the town, or the property owners, gets appraisers. But if the town's appraisal is less than the tax value, the town is in trouble, right, because it couldn't use its own appraisal. It has to be at least the value of the tax value, because you're overnight in the public. That value of land is so much per square footage. You can't come in now and try to claim just compensation is less than the tax value. So we can rely 100% on the tax value. That's all I'm saying.
Really appreciate the conversation and you joining us tonight while we discuss that. So I thank you. With that, we have a work session, and I think that was our work session. So I'd like to go ahead and move to adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.